Thank you, Annette. Good morning and welcome to the Humboldt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, an open-minded, open-hearted spiritual home to everyone who values acceptance of all people and care for all life on earth. I'm Stephen Sottong, your worship associate today, and we're glad you're here. We also humbly acknowledge that our fellowship is on unceded ancestral Wiyot land. From next week on, we will be going to hybrid services. Please check our website for information on the hybrid services in the coming weeks. We also ask members to remain online after this service for a congregational meeting. Later in the service, we'll share joys and concerns. If you'd like to share, please send them in the chat addressed directly to me, Stephen Sottong. The sound of the bell will now call us to the spirit of reverence. Each Sunday, we light a chalice, the symbol of our shared Unitarian Universalist beliefs. Our accompanying words today are adapted from Janet Parsons. The flame of our chalice this morning is a symbol of the warmth and brightness of our connections. The flame lights our way back together again from our separate lives, and it lights our way forward into promise and renewal. Every week, we also renew our commitment to this fellowship's foundational aspiration. Please join with me in these words shown on the slide. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. Now is a time set aside especially for the youth in our congregation. Debbie Kalish will be reading today.
Hi, thank you so much, Stephen. I'm Debbie Kalish. I'm one of the Religious Exploration staff members, and it's time for a story for all ages. I hope we have some younger ones with us today. Oh, there you are. Our story today is called The Golden Rule. It's written by Eileen Cooper and illustrated by Gabby Swiatkowska. Wonderful to have your children here. And all of us who are children at heart. There are beautiful illustrations in this book. This is just the cover page, and there's birds and leaves and all kinds of amazing creatures. So we're going to hear later today about a ship called the Golden Rule, but it's named after this rule. This is a rule all over the world called the Golden Rule, and this is a beautiful book about it. So a boy and his grandfather stood on a city sidewalk, looking up at the words printed on a billboard. "Grandpa, what does it say?" "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." People over the world call those words the Golden Rule. What does it mean, the boy wanted to know, and why is it golden? It means this: treat people the way you would like to be treated. It's golden because it's so valuable and a way of living your life that's so simple that it shines. Grandfather led the boy to another billboard. farther down the sidewalk. Some people put the golden rule another way. Do nothing to other people that you would not like having done to you. Either way, he said, it's a very good rule. Who's it for? Asked the boy. You, me, anyone can practice the golden rule. A rule that's the same for children and grown-ups? Same rule. There aren't too many rules like that. Very few. And it's for people everywhere? Everywhere. Whatever their religion, people find the idea of the golden rule in their holy books. Christianity says you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. Judaism says what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow humans. Islam says hurt no one, that no one may hurt you. Hinduism says this is the sum of duty. Do nothing to others which would cause them pain. Buddhism says, do not do to others what would hurt you. And the Shawnee tribe says, do not kill or injure your neighbor, for it's not he or she that you injure yourself. The boy and his grandfather sat on a park bench. So, Grandpa, how can I start to practice the golden rule? You begin by using your imagination. My imagination? You imagine how someone else feels. For instance, a new child who is joining your class. How do you think that boy or girl is feeling? New kids always look scared. Would you be scared if it was you? Oh, yes. What would make you feel better? If someone smiled at me. So to practice the golden rule, you would smile at the new kid. You got it. I bet you can think of other ways you'd like to be treated and ways you wouldn't want to be treated. How do you feel when you're teased or bullied? Sad? Yes. Mad? Yes. Small? I feel small. Sad, mad, small? Do you like feeling like that? No. Neither does anyone else. The boy thought for a moment about the golden rule. I see. There are lots of things I could do. I should tell the truth because I don't like being lied to. I want people to listen to me, so I should listen to other people. And when I'm sick or when I'm tired, sometimes I need help. So I could offer my help to those who need it. You're getting the idea, Grandfather nodded. The boy looked at his grandfather. Practicing the golden rule seems like it can be hard. I said it was simple, but I didn't say it would always be easy. Grandpa, the boy said, the golden rule is a very big thing, isn't it? Very big and very small and very old. It's been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years? Well, then I don't think everyone is practicing the way they should. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many problems between people, between countries. You're right, my boy. I wonder how things would change if everyone lived by the golden rule. I think people would be nicer, kinder. They'd act better towards their families and friends and even strangers. What if countries lived by the golden rule, Grandfather asked. Well, then people wouldn't want to hurt each other because they don't like being hurt. Maybe there wouldn't be wars. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Wonderful, Grandpa. But you can't make everyone in the world practice the golden rule. There's only one person you can ask to do that. Me? You. It begins with you. Thank you. Thank you. And now we can sing our song. Next week, I hope to see you kids.
We are a welcoming congregation and intend that every person who joins us feels seen and heard and held in this sacred space. One way we do this is by honoring any joys or concerns we carry in our hearts and spirits. I'll read the joys or concerns from the chat and then drop a pebble into the bowl of water. The ripples formed represent how our cares and prayers move out from this community into the world, touching others. Chip Sharp says, thank you to Sina Marina, Laurel Bussey, Beverly Morgan Lewis for helping to display the Black Lives Matter and Health Climate Action banners yesterday from noon until 1:30 in Eureka. Also from Chip Sharp, Tom Coriel with Elizabeth Eckert, was Elizabeth Eckert's son-in-law and a dear friend of our fellowship. The memorial service for Tom will be this Saturday, March 19th at 1 p.m. at the Arcata Veterans Hall, J and 14th Street. From Debbie, 50 years ago, I first became a mother. We hold in our care all that has been shared today and know that some things are so large, so fresh, or so fragile that we hold them inside for now. We drop one last pebble for those unspoken joys and concerns that connect our beloved fellowship. We'll follow this with a moment of silence. We'll now hear Elizabeth Harrington singing Blue Boat Home.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known, the wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
In 2010, a derelict boat sank in a gale in Humboldt Bay. The boat was identified as a historical anti-nuclear vessel, the Golden Rule. How it ended up in Humboldt Bay, no one knows. But the local Humboldt Bay and Garberville chapters of Veterans for Peace, in keeping with their goal of promoting peace, took on the incredibly formidable task of restoring the boat. The community eventually became involved. Individuals and organizations, including this fellowship, became plank owners for their support. Eventually, Veterans for Peace National became involved. It took 5 years, but the restored Golden Rule is now sailing on a mission to promote nuclear disarmament, which is in keeping with our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Our speaker today, Helen Jaccard, is a crew member and project manager for the Golden Rule. She will talk about the history of the Golden Rule and its mission. Helen?
Thank you very much. I have spoken with this group once before, and I'm really happy to be here and to be welcome in your UU fellowship. And I would like to share my screen and talk about the Golden Rule, and then I would like to talk a little bit about a particular nuclear issue in the news today, which is the war in Ukraine. This is the Golden Rule as she is today, and we're sailing for a nuclear-free future and a peaceful, sustainable world. And as Stephen was telling us, this is a project of Veterans for Peace, who has over 100 chapters, some of them international, over 3,000 members. In 1958, the Golden Rule was sailed towards Hawaii to try to stop nuclear bomb tests in the Marshall Islands. The United States dropped 67 nuclear bombs in the Marshall Islands, and the effects of those bombs are evident today in birth defects, cancer, atmospheric radiation, and polluted food and water sources in the Marshall Islands. They're totally dependent on imported food, which is very poor quality. In 1958, therefore, after 60-some nuclear bombs had been blasted, the community was trying to get this stopped. And so they were writing letters to Congress, making phone calls, visits to the president. They were writing op-ed pieces and articles for newspapers and magazines. They had TV and radio interviews, and there were mass protests and demonstrations against the bomb. These tactics were not proving to be effective at the time. And so a group of Quakers purchased the Golden Rule. It was a brand new boat, outfitted it, and intended to sail right to the Marshall Islands to put themselves in the way of the nuclear bomb tests. They headed out of Los Angeles and made it as far as Honolulu. A second ship made it all the way to the Marshall Islands. When the Golden Rule and her crew made it to Honolulu, the crew was arrested and spent 60 days in jail. So they got to Honolulu, they resupplied, and they headed out towards the Marshall Islands, and the Coast Guard cutter brought them back so the crew could be arrested. The arrest and 60 days in jail of the Golden Rule crew sparked an international outrage. And so people all over the world were demonstrating to let the Golden Rule sail, but most importantly, to stop the nuclear bomb tests. These demonstrations and the huge wave of anti-nuclear sentiment all over the world helped lead to the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, which President Kennedy signed along with the USSR and Great Britain. It also led to the founding of Greenpeace, where another group of Quaker activists sailed the Phyllis McCormick and renamed her the Rainbow Warrior. The 1958 Golden Rule was sold, and it sank in Humboldt Bay in 2010 in a gale. And as Steve said, it was restored. It took 5 years by Quakers and Veterans for Peace and other boat lovers, and especially old wooden boat lovers. And we relaunched June 20th, 2015. There she is sailing into Humboldt Bay for the first time in many years. That began the actual mission of the Golden Rule Project, which is to educate people about nuclear issues. And so we have sailed all over the West Coast. 2015 through 2019, it was up and down the West Coast. And in 2019, we sailed to Hawaii. That was in response to President Trump and Kim Jong-un threatening each other with nuclear weapons, and we decided it was time to go back to the Pacific. Our intention was to sail from Hawaii to Guam, well, first to the Marshall Islands, where the original destination of the Golden Rule, then to Guam and Okinawa and to Japan in time for the 75th anniversary of the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, COVID came along and stopped us. So there's the boat in front of Diamond Head in Honolulu in both 1958 and 2020. So we came back to California and are now awaiting our chance to go to the Great Loop. And what we're going to do is put Golden Rule, this is going to start September 1st. We're going to put Golden Rule on a truck and take her to Minneapolis. And we're going to do 1.25 times around the eastern half of the country. So we're going to go down the entire Mississippi River, around Florida, up into Maine, and then back down to New York, where we'll sail up the Hudson River, go through the Erie Canal, all over the Great Lakes, and come again back through the center of the country, back to the Gulf of Mexico. This will be a 15-month voyage, 10,000 miles. And we're going to be visiting 28 large cities and 68 smaller cities and towns along our way. So what do we do when we come into port? Well, it could be for a protest, for example, against the Fleet Week activities where the Navy brings warships into our cities. We protest against other things like nuclear armed submarine bases. We give presentations, of course, like the one I'm doing today. We take people sailing. We give tours of the boat. It takes a few minutes because it's not a very big boat. We have people sailing with us who have two good sailors aboard, who can have two inexperienced people come aboard. And it's a lot of fun. So you can sail for a day or a week or a month. And then we had a peace action sailing camp with a group of youth from Tucson, Arizona. And we supported an indigenous canoe journey. And wherever we go, we support the Marshallese. So this is a group of Bikini Islanders that came to remember the Castle Bravo biggest nuclear test the United States ever did, which is still affecting people today. I'd like to switch my focus for a minute to the war in Ukraine. And one thing I would like to point out is how small Ukraine is in geography to Russia, and there it is. But it's also very big. Ukraine is very big in the world for crop production, minerals, and oil pipeline that goes from Russia to the rest of Europe. When the Soviet Union collapsed and Germany was reunited in, I believe, 1990, the United States and the rest of NATO promised that NATO would not step one step further east if East Germany could become part of NATO. Well, during those years, NATO marched steadily further and further east towards Russia. Our position is there's no excuse for starting a war, ever. It is allowed under the United Nations defense policy. If your country is being attacked, you're allowed to respond. But this was a preemptive attack due to a perceived existential threat because NATO was expanding possibly into Ukraine and because Ukraine was putting a massive number of troops on the border with Russia. Turns out that Ukraine might not even be welcome in NATO. And so to have said that we won't agree that Ukraine will not become part of NATO was a historic mistake. And it could still be a solution to agree to that with Russia. Other problems are the United States has nuclear armed missiles in Europe, and they have anti-ballistic missiles, which increase the threat of nuclear war. There's also competition for the fuel supply to Europe. There's minerals in Ukraine, and there's a lot of agriculture. There were two agreements called the Minsk agreements that would have easily averted this problem had the conditions of the agreements continued to be met by both sides. There's particular danger of nuclear problems in Ukraine. There's the possibility of nuclear war, and Putin has stated that he would use tactical, smaller nuclear weapons if he was overpowered by NATO's conventional weapons. Donald Trump also said that he would use nuclear weapons in response to a non-nuclear threat. So this is something that's very dangerous that's playing out right now. So Putin might drop a small nuclear bomb in order to get NATO to back off or to get Ukraine to surrender, betting that NATO is not going to respond in kind. There are many treaties that have been torn up recently, especially under the Trump administration, but it's been, we've been breaking our treaties right and left. And then the nuclear weapons in Europe, they definitely threaten Russian security. There's also nuclear power plants. And if the power was lost to one of these power plants, you could end up with another Chernobyl or Fukushima situation. And nobody wants that, not the Russians, not anybody. There's about 50 tons of plutonium that's been extracted from Ukraine's nuclear power fuel cells. And those are now available to either use for dirty bombs or to create nuclear weapons. And then there's Chernobyl itself. Now, the fuel rods are not an immediate concern. They've been in cooling ponds longer than was needed for them to be cool enough to be removed from those ponds. Usually we leave the rods in the cooling ponds for 5 years, and then we put them in special storage locations wherever they were generated. So the issue is it might take about a month to expose those fuel rods to the air, and if there were cracks in them, then you could end up with a problem. On the good side, President Biden just canceled a Vandenberg missile test. They test their nuclear missiles twice a year from Vandenberg, and he canceled one of them so that there would be no misunderstandings with Russia. We believe that in order to stop the war in Ukraine, the process needs to be de-escalation, so a ceasefire, negotiation, get the Russian troops out, but also agree to no NATO expansion. We want diplomacy, not weapons. So the United States has been sending a lot of weapons to Ukraine. And we've also been sanctioning what hurts the people, a form of warfare. So we've been sanctioning Russia, and that's hurting us right now in the form of increased gas prices. So this golden rule thing, as far as if you do something to others that might hurt you, well, that's happening right now already. We need to remove the U.S. nuclear weapons from Europe. There's 5 countries that possess U.S. nuclear weapons, and we need to take the anti-ballistic missile systems away because they are a first strike strategy. I'll talk about that if you'd like. So we must press for abolishing all nuclear weapons and abolishing all war, and replace fossil fuels and nuclear power with actual renewables. Could someone tell me where I stand on time, please?
You're fine.
All right, this is just a little graphic that kind of shows there's a nuclear umbrella that the United States has extended to NATO members, and Russia has extended to a few of their allies like Belarus. And you can see right below Russia, which is in dark blue, Ukraine, which is in light blue there, one of the states allied with Russia, or had been at one time. And here's where the US nuclear bombs are stored in Europe. About 150 of the B-61 nuclear weapons are in Europe. The Minsk agreements that I referred to call for a ceasefire, a withdrawal of all weapons, armies, mercenaries, all the people that are involved in the war making. Implement the Donetsk and Luhansk autonomy in the Donbass region of Ukraine. Give pardons and amnesty to the people that have been fighting, and exchange hostages and prisoners, and bring in humanitarian assistance. And resume our socio-economic ties. We've been trying to hurt Russia by just canceling them in every cultural and sporting event that there is. So we need to stop that. That's really not fair to the people. You know, it's not the people of Russia that are attacking us, that are attacking Ukraine. Excuse me. It's not the people that are doing that. The people don't want war. Nobody wants war. Somehow it's happening because, for one thing, the United States and NATO have been acting like bullies. And so, you know, we need to stop that. The Veterans for Peace has created a nuclear posture review that you might be interested in. It came out of the Veterans for Peace Nuclear Abolition Working Group, which has been in effect for about a year now, and we decided that it was time to preempt Biden's nuclear posture review, which probably includes the same full spectrum dominance bullying attitude that the United States has had towards the rest of the world for a long time, replace that with a full spectrum cooperation attitude. I'd like to point out a member of Congress, Elizabeth Holmes Norton, who's in Washington, D.C., has put out a Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic Energy Conversion Act, H.R. 2850, calls on Congress to cancel the 30-year, $2 trillion nuclear weapons replacement program and use the funds for clean energy and for cleanup of the nuclear mess. You could ask your congresspeople to join the parliamentary pledge of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Or you could ask your city, and it's possible that Arcata and Eureka may have already joined the international campaign on to abolish nuclear weapons cities campaign. That's where cities and counties and states demand that the federal government ratify the new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And you can ask your city to join Mayors for Peace. I'm positive Arcata is a member. I don't know about Eureka. So that's what is on my mind today. And when the time comes, I'd be happy to answer questions for y'all. Thank you.
Helen has offered to answer questions after the offertory. Please type your questions into the chat. Our fellowship is a living entity, and like all living things, needs nurture and sustenance. Its brief and its breath and heartbeat, its life itself, is only derived from its living components, us. The slide that follows provides options on how to contribute to the fellowship's financial health. This morning's offering will now be gratefully accepted as Annette Gurnee Hull blesses us with music. We'll go to the questions in the chat then. Chip Sharp asks Helen to post the links in the chat, please. And Helen, of course, says you can donate to the Golden Rule Project by going to vfpgoldenrule.org. And I'm not seeing any other questions in. Are there tours of the Golden Rule, and will it be back in Humboldt Bay?
We just spent a couple of months in Humboldt Bay doing maintenance, and unfortunately, we were not able to give tours at the time. And since then, we sailed to San Diego and back. We're now in San Francisco Bay and would be happy to give tours there, but it's not likely we'll be back in Humboldt Bay until 2024. We'll be doing the Great Leap in September 2022 this year. until the end of 2023, at which point we'll either bring her back by truck or go back through the Panama Canal during 2024. So we will be back, but I don't know how long it's going to be yet. The history of US NATO nuclear policies and actions, including violating treaties, right. So there's the START treaties, there's the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty was torn up. New START now still exists. It's the only treaty in existence that is between Russia and the United States that is still in effect, which is it's a strategic arms limitation treaty, which means strategic is those are the weapons used for deterrence, to try and say, you better not attack us or we're going to attack you. And then the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which Trump destroyed, was a real great protection for Europe, because that would have prevented, or did prevent for a long time, decades, it prevented Russia from developing weapons or deploying weapons that were intermediate in range that would easily attack the rest of Europe. And the long-range ones were, intended for the United States. Those are still allowed. And short-range ones are more tactical. They're usually more small and are of limited. You don't want to use those either, but they're a little bit less destructive. The anti-ballistic missile systems, I just wanted to explain one thing about those. Those are there because they want to be able to guarantee a successful first strike. They prevent a retaliatory strike. So if, for example, Russia decided to attack Europe, it would need some anti-ballistic missiles in place to shoot down a retaliatory strike from one of the European nations. So it's a first strike guarantee kind of weapon. It's not used for defense really at all. Let's see, Colleen says, I believe NATO actions as contributing to this invasion isn't Russia's behavior in Georgia, Serbia, Syria, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary proof enough that they can't be trusted. There's a lot of propaganda, but I do believe that Russia has in the past been more aggressive than they currently are, and I'm not sure what happened in those areas. It's not something that I'm hearing about in my sources. You're probably not either. So let me sort of take a rain check on that one, and maybe I can get back to Steve and get an answer for you. I'll capture that. I can actually do something about that. Okay, my dad is a veteran and a sailor. How can I get him as a guest sailor on the boat? Day, where is your dad? It's easy to become a guest sailor. In fact, you can even do that in San Francisco Bay. Go onto the website, vfpgoldenrule.org. I'll put the link in the chat, and / crew-application.
As for the hat, you should be able to find it at vfp.org.
I'm glad that you guys are aware of what's going on in the rest of the world regarding Russia. I would like to point out there's a symmetrical argument here about aggression. And so if you're talking about other countries that Russia has been hostile towards, please also remember that these wars of choice in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Libya, and the sanctions against Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and 38 other nations. These are all optional. These are not defensive. These are a way to support US corporations and including the weapons manufacturers. So can Russia be trusted? Maybe not. Can the United States be trusted? Absolutely not. So, if you're asking questions about trust, I think that it's important, like in nuclear disarmament, to do the trust but verify, right? So you trust that the nuclear disarmament is happening, but you also have like the IAEA or other inspection agencies in there making sure that you're doing what you said you would do. Now, when Reagan and Gorbachev helped take the world from 80,000 nuclear weapons down to 15,000 nuclear weapons, many of those are still being dismantled. And the inspectors are on site, international inspectors are on site making sure that the dismantling process is going as scheduled. So I have a lot of hope that nuclear disarmament can continue and, go forth. And we don't need these things. So, they're only going to destroy all of society. So let's just get rid of them, and let's verifiably, irreversibly get rid of them.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Thank you all.
And now as we leave, the benediction as we extinguish the chalice. May love and wisdom be in your heart. May love and courage be in your mind. May love and strength be in your hands. May Spirit be with you and work through you today and all days. Go in peace, walk in love, and be a light unto the world. Annette will now play our closing song as we virtually stretch our hands to one another. The lyrics are on the slide. Shalom, salam alaikum, blessed be, ashe, namaste, aho, and amen.